We now bring you something amazing. Science! Ah! Dr. Venkman here. I'm just kidding. So I'm wearing my YouTube fake scientist outfit, and I got pictures of the Earth up here because we're going to talk about flat earthers and flat Earth and everything else. Um, as any good conspiracy theory uh, it begins, you always have to have a kernel of truth or some sort of lateral explanation. And this is why I like to mess with flat earthers and people who like to mess with flat earthers. I'm just like playing both sides at this point, just for fun, because this is the internet, and it's fun to screw with people. But I'm going to tell you guys how I tend to screw with people a little bit, and then of course it's like, oh, ha ha, Kevin, blah 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 blah. So, first of all, a common thing that people like to say is, I can prove that the Earth is flat, right? When they don't obviously believe it. And then they'll say, the poster of the Earth is flat. And that's usually a good joke, right? That's why I'm showing these posters of the Earth. Plus, they're pretty cool posters. I'm looking here. Yeah, I mean, I love posters of the Earth. You know? But I'm also doing this to show up and make a little bit of a point. Imagine instead, a lot of these posters are created using, some of these posters created using CG, right? Some are just, plain great 2D art, right? Or great photoshopping, digital artists. But if you could imagine, like, let's say this is a good old picture right here. Let's say, imagine that this, and it probably is, this is probably one that's made from a CG model or something close to that. So imagine that this is a CG model, right? If you're in the 3D modeling world, this Earth is round. But when you're viewing it from, like, let's say I'm a gamer. I'm when I'm not in the world, when I'm not immersed in it, and I'm viewing it like this, it's flat. It's like both flat and spherical. I mean, it's always round, but because round is, like two-dimensional shape. But to me, it's just round. It's not spherical, right? And when I go into the code, I don't see any of the roundness. All I see is like code. When you go into code for a 3D model, you just see numbers and hex code and machine code, whatever it is that it's programmed in or encoded in. And I'm using that to give you a basis for what I'm about to explain. If you remember when I was talking about time and traveling faster than light, how time is not a particle. Anyone who looks for a time particle, they can't even find theoretical proof. What the theoretical proof would be. They can't find any evidence of it. But they keep seeing evidence of, like, time dilation. And that can only occur with particles. At least when people are looking for, like, chronotons or stuff like that. Well, the reality is there's no such thing as time dilation. It's an arresting of the atomic particles or atomic structures, little particles, whatever it is. And if you go back to my video, you see that I really don't. If you try to argue with me and say, you misused the term atomic and molecule and particle, and it really doesn't matter. All of those structures, from the smallest of particles and structures and whatever they may be, when you get to a point where gravity, the ambient gravity that exists in the universe, has an effect due to traveling so fast and hard, that effect just kind of builds up. Best lateral description I can describe is like breaking the sound barrier. The faster you travel through the air, the more resistance you have. Gravity works in a very similar way, and that's why when fighter pilots are going Mach 1 or Mach 2 or whatever, they start pulling G's, right? And it's like gravity is compounding on itself against the molecules and atomic structures and particles and electrons and neutrons and everything in your body. Stuff like that starts feeling a heavier gravitational effect. And when you go to light speed, the more mass you have, the more you feel gravitational effect from the ambient gravity in the universe. And that's something that a lot of people forget. The universe has a lot of ambient gravity. That's how galaxies, pinwheel galaxies, cluster galaxies, etc., solar systems stay in place without flying apart at the seams. Gravity holds them. And when you travel faster and faster and faster, gravity arrests those structures, atomic, molecule, particle, whatever you have. Gravity grabs a hold of them hard, and things stop moving. So what you really get is stasis on appearance of time stopping. Time's not actually stopping, though, is it? I just consulted my scientific advisor. He said, no, time does not actually stop, which means that time is a state of existence, just as the third dimension is a state of existence, just as thought is a state of existence, thought without essence, or physicality, just as two-dimensional physicality is in existence. So these are the dimensions of the universe, and possibly more universes. And when you exist in a state of existence, when you are in a state of existence, your existence is beholden to that state of existence. When you are in a video game, you're not really in a video game, you're taking control of an avatar, right? So that avatar is your current state of existence. But you're like immersing yourself in the immersion and everything of that game world, right? Sorry. Got a little bit of allergies there. Nose is itching. And I'm unprofessional. Anyway, so you experience the game world. You say, wow! I'm like moving on X, Y, and Z axis. But when you're viewing the game world as a player, so you're viewing it in two different ways. One as a character inside the game, and another way as a player. As a player, you're viewing it through a computer monitor. That computer monitor is flat. You're not experiencing the game world physically. You're experiencing the communication between the computer monitor and you. So that game world is two types of dimensions. Thought, because you're using your thought and your ideas to control your character. So you're using essentially what people call the first dimension. The first dimension of thought, to control your character, so your character or avatar in there is experiencing what they believe to be 3 dimensions, and what you are experiencing through the monitor, that's 2-dimensional. So you're transversing multiple dimensions when you communicate with the character, conceptually. But at the same time, you live in the 3rd dimension, right? You live in the 3rd dimension. Now imagine you live in the so-called 1st dimension. And that is thought. What a lot of people call thought. Existence without tangibility. If you exist without tangibility, you don't know that you're not tangible. Therefore, everything feels real to you. Like your character believes that essentially your character's perspective, if your character had a consciousness, instead of you inserting your consciousness to control the character, if your character had a consciousness, they would look around and they say, I'm experiencing a 3-dimensional world. I live in a 3-dimensional world. But in reality, they really exist in a 2-dimensional world, essentially, right? Although they do experience substance, but they believe that they're in the 3rd dimension. Well, it's the same type of concept here. If you are in the 1st dimension of thought, right? Existence without tangibility, what you don't know is that you're not tangible in the sense that I'm saying tangible. In this dimension of thought, tangibility has a totally different meaning, a totally different experience. So you may believe that you are in essentially a 3-dimensional world, but you're really in a dimension of thought, right? 2nd dimension, that's where you have the axis, the X and Y axis. People usually try and describe these things with, there's the X axis, Y axis, right? People usually try to describe these things by drawing images. Well, that's technically wrong in a lot of ways, a lot more wrong than the example I gave to you. Essentially, what you have is image without substance, right? Or you have some sort of substance, you have some sort of thing that you can draw upon to consume, and you have thought. So you basically have the concepts of up and down, or whatever it is, left and right. The flat plane. If you turned, let's say this Earth is a 2-dimensional Earth. If you turn this Earth perfectly vertical, you would not even see a line. Because a line would suggest that there's depth. The 2nd dimension has no depth. But if you're a person living in the 2nd dimensional world, you're probably walking all around and you think essentially it's 3 dimensions. You can think, you can walk, you can interact, and you think, I am who I am. So from the 3rd dimensional perspective, I am looking upon this image of an Earth, and I'm saying that's 2-dimensional. From a 2-dimensional perspective, someone on that planet Earth, they're saying, wow, look, we're basically 3-dimensional. Oh, and those people in that universe of just thought, even though they can interact with each other, they don't interact like we do. They're like 2 dimensions, essentially. Right? That's how it stacks up. Or they're 1-dimension lower, would be more accurate. 1-dimensional lower than the 2 dimensions, right? Or the 2-dimensional people. So from our perspective, the 2-dimensional people look on the 1-dimensional people and think, oh, they're not our same dimension. But from the perspective of everyone in all these dimensions, they probably believe themselves to be essentially the same way we believe ourselves to be. So, this is all part of the fascinating world of dimensional sciences, quantum sciences, theoretical sciences. This is where I say that our three-dimensional world is flat from the perspective of a fourth-dimensional being. Someone in a dimension, fourth dimension, where all angles on the cube intersect, where life is an Escher painting, connecting all points in a form that's beyond just my hands. Like, imagine I'm reaching out to touch my finger at the same time. My finger's down here, I'm touching it, and I'm touching it over here, or whatever, right? All at the same time. Multiple points of contact. Those fourth dimensional people probably think, oh, well, we're just normal three-dimensional people. We can't comprehend an existence that's lower than us. Wow, those three-dimensional people seem pretty flat to us. And us three-dimensional people are looking at the two-dimensional people. And we're saying, wow, I live in a world that you can orbit around. It's wonderful orbiting. And that two-dimensional, that Earth with the two-dimensional looks pretty flat to me. And the people on the two-dimensional Earth are thinking, wow, we can travel all over the world. We can interact with it and everything else and all that good stuff. Boy, those people in the one dimension who are just thoughts, boy, that seems pretty flat to us. That is how the Earth is flat when viewed from the fourth dimension. So, that's how I like messing with people. Now, obviously, there are a lot of caveats to what I'm saying. For example, definition of flat. It basically is each dimension has its own concept of flat. And, even in our third dimension, what is the definition of flat? Oh, that soda is flat, which means you don't feel textures from the bubbly bubbles. That play fell flat. In other words, the concept was flat. The theoretical thought process of that play was singular plane. So flat already in our dimension has multiple meanings. Imagine how many more meanings it has from the fourth dimension. Maybe the same number, maybe more. But in either case, our world, when viewed from a fourth dimensional being's perspective, would appear pretty damn flat, because it probably wouldn't be as interesting to them as the world in which they live. So, the Earth is flat. That's how you can win that argument with science. It's also how you can lose that argument with science, too. Because unless you're a fourth dimensional being, it's not flat. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care.